AAAA 24 Corporate Social Responsibility and its Implications. During the last years, one of the most recurrent topics in the business field is social responsibility. Thus, in several countries there is growing interest in its implications, given that it is not only the active and voluntary contribution to economic development, but also aspects related to the environment and the sustainability of the population. This approach is deeply linked to the globalized environment where business is carried out, given that the activities carried out by companies, as well as their decisions, have a direct impact on their image. This is how new models have been adopted when managing resources and managing certain processes, with the aim of abandoning traditional schemes that did not take into account the stability of nature and the future of future generations. Corporate social responsibility becomes an obligation, consisting of all those actions aimed at sustainable development, and prioritizing aspects such as ethics and justice. Social and environmental concerns have increased dramatically in recent decades. This is a reflection of the ignorance and negligence of many governments, who do not set standards and laws to regulate certain harmful activities, which are carried out by some factories and producers of articles for the consumption. This reality makes it necessary to know what the fundamental elements are when talking about social responsibility, allowing companies to set clear and objective goals. In the first place, there is voluntariness. As its name indicates, it is based on the disposition that companies must have to regulate their activities according to ethical criteria. The business plans and decisions cannot be alien to the environment, as they directly affect the population and have an impact on nature. This shows the importance of being aware of the reality of each country, as well as the needs of its people, regardless of the interests that are defended by the power groups. On the other hand is the identity and sustainability, through which you can evaluate the competitive advantages of the market, serving as a support mechanism to understand the relationships and values that characterize it. This allows us to identify how the processes and strategies implemented generate an economic, social, and environmental impact. A socially responsible company will be any company that prioritizes human development, promoting better opportunities for its workers, without interfering with the stability of its environment. It is essential that you assume a commitment that is based on solidarity and the protection of the planet. Only in this way you can obtain results that do not interfere with the future of humanity. Cat 25 The exploitation and illegal commercialization of natural resources. From the First World War to our days, all the armed conflicts that have been part of the history of man have had serious consequences for nature. This is because the countries involved need to finance their activities, for which they resort to the exploitation of natural resources in the territories they have at their disposal. It should also be mentioned that they are illegal processes, which result in unauthorized or regulated commercialization. To better understand the aforementioned situation, it is necessary to be clear that there are natural resources that are easier to market. This will depend on the complexity of the extraction process, given that if a few people are able to do so, only through the use of basic tools, then the same is possible on the part of rebel groups. Even, in many cases, the latter will not be dedicated to the extraction of resources, but will impose taxes for their trade, blocking transport routes or putting other kinds of obstacles. There are several natural resources that can be exploited in the way previously explained. These include gold and precious stones. Unlike others, such as oil, its great advantage lies in that they are products that cannot be tracked easily. This feature allows its commercialization in a legal way in the market. In this way, it represents a very lucrative practice for smuggling, because high profit margins are perceived. According to the United Nations organization, the countries that face the greatest problems are those that have certain natural resources in abundance. This is due to the fact that after internal conflicts, it is much more complicated to achieve a sustainable peace, since there continue to be people who prefer to benefit from the exploitation and commercialization of these resources. If we take into account the lack of regulation and control in these processes, there is no doubt that they end up negatively affecting local communities, but also the environment and its stability. Finally, we only have to reflect on this reality, which affects millions of people around the world. It is necessary to give as an example to countries that have managed to get ahead after experiencing guerrilla warfare and other similar conflicts, something that has been possible thanks to a more humanitarian vision of their society. Natural resources should only be used for the benefit of development, leaving aside political or religious beliefs, and becoming a source of hope for those most affected. AAA 26. Why are there animals in danger of extinction? The relationship of animals with the other members of an ecosystem allows a delicate balance to exist in nature. This is the result of complex mechanisms of interdependence, which are vulnerable to human intervention. In this way, we have witnessed an alarming increase in species that are in danger of extinction. This makes it necessary to analyze their causes and propose possible solutions. Although many people think that it is a relatively new process, forming part of the last decades, it must be clear that the human race, since its inception, has used wildlife in its own benefit, killing or selectively capturing several animals. This was motivated by the search to create safer environments, or to use parts of their bodies as food or clothing. Also, in the Roman Empire and Egypt it was common to capture exotic species for entertainment purposes. Currently, one of the main causes for the existence of animals in danger of extinction is the partial or total destruction of their habitats. This is a consequence of the lack of planning in the establishment of agricultural crops, the uncontrolled felling of trees, human settlements, and other actions that alter the ecological balance. These unnatural changes cause some species to be unable to adapt to the altered areas, gradually disappearing. This in turn has negative effects on the food and food chains, since in many cases there is not enough information about their role in the ecosystems they integrated. On the other hand, chemical pollution also brings a series of consequences on the fauna and flora of the planet. The insecticides that are used in crops end up entering the currents of rivers and oceans, becoming the food of certain microorganisms that will then be ingested by fish and other marine animals. While these will be devoured by birds and some mammals, perpetuating a food chain where progressively concentrates the presence of chemicals, which in the long term affect the processes of reproduction and incubation. These situations become more common because of the demographic growth of society. Thinking about this, it is necessary to focus on the development of alternatives to satisfy their basic needs, instead of the non-rational exploitation of natural resources. In addition, it is very important to consider the advantages of cloning, which could allow some animals in danger of extinction not disappear completely. AAA 27. The value of biodiversity in our planet. Among the most important pillars of sustainable development is the preservation of biodiversity on the planet. This is a subject that must be analyzed thoroughly, given that the biological diversity that exists, consisting of the wide variety of living beings and other natural elements, is influenced by industrial activities and the way of life that human beings have. The value of biodiversity can be measured from 2 points of view, but we must always take into consideration the ecosystems and genetic differences between each species, as both are the result of interaction with the environment. Likewise, since it is a natural historical process, it is necessary that its existence continue indefinitely, representing its inalienable right. First, there is the ecological aspect, where biodiversity has a systemic and functional value, given that the very survival of the human being depends on its integrity. In this way, the elements that constitute it have the capacity to regulate natural energy flows, stabilizing ecosystems and affecting atmospheric and climatic processes. but they are also responsible for recovering and reconverting waste and nutrients. Although certain scientific discoveries and technological advances have favored the development of agriculture, biological diversity remains indispensable for ecosystems to function properly. Therefore, when the delicate networks created by nature are not respected, an imbalance begins to be perceived. This can be evidenced in several activities that in recent years have increased dramatically, such as industrial fishing, where there is an extraction of marine resources on a large scale, which provokes anthropogenic disturbances. When there is a greater consumption of resources and a depredation of the environment in favor of unregulated economic growth, biodiversity is threatened by groups of power that do not take humanity into account as a whole, nor the possibility of a free future of natural catastrophes. Here its value can be analyzed in another way, studying the long-term need for food, supplies, and raw materials. In addition, biodiversity contributes to tourism, allowing many countries to receive significant income through the preservation of parks, forests, and reserves. There is no doubt that the governments of each nation must establish the mission of conserving and defending biodiversity. The new generations have to understand its importance, and value it at every stage of their lives. As far as possible, we should avoid products and services whose manufacturers do not prioritize ecological responsibility, since both man and his culture are part of the planet Earth, and we all have an obligation to protect and respect it. Ka. 28 Tourism in France and its main attractions. Tourism is one of the most important sources of income for many countries around the world. This is the case of France, where it represents a fundamental part of its economy, with approximately 80 million visitors each year. People from different parts consider it the ideal destination, being mostly of American, Japanese and Chinese nationality, as well as other countries of the European continent. Although there is no doubt that its capital, the beautiful city of Paris, is its most famous attraction, there are a number of places and activities worth knowing. In France you can find all kinds of sites and buildings that are distinguished by their beauty, not for nothing their historical and artistic heritage is recognized worldwide as one of the largest. It is one of the few territories where there is the possibility of doing the most diverse activities, from visits to the beach or the city, to the practice of high-risk sports, such as mountaineering. However, Paris is the place that attracts the attention of tourists. In this city is the famous Eiffel Tower, a giant structure made of refined iron that was built between 1887 and 1889. Also, is the Arc de Triomphe, one of the most majestic monuments in Europe. It is considered by citizens a national symbol, and at its feet you can always see a flame that is kept burning every day, in honor of the victims who died during the First World War. On the other hand are the museums, which are the main attraction for tourism related to art. One of the most emblematic is the Orsay Museum, which is located near the Seine River. Inside, the public can find the largest collection of Impressionist works from around the world, as well as other paintings and sculptures that were conceived between 1848 and 1914. It is estimated that an average of 3 million people visit its halls each season. One of the most important buildings in France, and that in past centuries was the official residence of the kings, is the Palace of Versailles. It is one of the most spectacular architectural complexes in the European continent, attracting millions of tourists every year. It consists of more than 700 rooms, as well as other attractions of great beauty. These include the Gallery of Mirrors, the extensive and well-kept gardens, and the fountains that are accompanied by sculptures of incredible artistic value. Finally, it only remains to say that the people who have had the pleasure of sightseeing in France have been captivated instantly. Thanks to its innumerable attractions and the wide variety of activities that can be done, it is still the main destination for travelers from all over the world. A reality that seems to have no intention of changing.